Hello everyone, welcome back to the Benchwarmers Podcast. In this week's episode, I'm delighted to be joined by the Kings Lynn Town Chairman, Stephen Cleeve. Stephen, how are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you indeed. Gabriel, how are you?
I'm good, thank you also. So obviously lots going on right now in terms of the National League and everything going on with COVID-19, whether the season should continue. But I think we'll start off by talking about how you actually came about to taking over Kings Lynn. So how did the opportunity present itself to you?
Well, I looked at other clubs and then not many of them I have to add, and then I spoke to Buster, the previous chairman, for some weeks, months, and he actually, I think it was years, maybe a year or so. But anyway, we spent a long time. Buster's involved. He's well known in the local community. He's got a Speedway stadium. He runs a Speedway team. So I went to watch Speedway a few times. We'd had a chat about things, and eventually Buster decided that it was time for him to sell, and I was there. I was. So there you go. That's it, really.
Yeah. So was there like a certain appeal about Kings Lynn which sort of appealed to you?
Yeah, well, I live in Norfolk, so I don't admittedly live in Kings Lynn, but I live not too far from Norwich, and from my perspective, I wanted to get involved. Really, I decided with a club which was locally based, or at least localish, as far as Norfolk can be. And my main objective was to be involved on a day-to-day basis to try. And it's very hard to do that if you're working remotely, because really you've got to have someone then working for you and doing the job. And it's different. And whilst that's fine, it's a lot easier if you're there and present. So that was all. And I looked around, and really in Norfolk, apart from Norwich, there's no one else. And no, I mean there are clubs, but the point was, from my perspective, that I wanted to take a club forward that had legs, and I always thought Kings Lynn could fulfil those objectives. Kings Lynn have got a potentially great supporters base. Its negatives and its positives are very, very similar. That it's remote, but equally that means there's not much around it. So it's bad for getting players. It's good for getting fans in some respects, because you're unless your fan wants to travel 40 miles, 45 miles, there's not any higher football on offer, other than Kings Lynn. So that's that, and it's got legs in terms of where it can go. It's in the years, not necessarily the recent past or the very recent past, but in years gone by, it's had great support, and And I thought if we could catch the imagination and fire the imagination of those fans and give them something to support, that they would hopefully come back and generate new fans. And I'm pretty sure that's what we've been doing.
And you mentioned there how Kings Lynn is sort of not, well, in terms of Norfolk anyway, there aren't many teams around there you could possibly take over. But I noticed last season you had a player called Alfie Payne who was on loan at you from Norwich. Do you think it helps having like a big local team like Norwich quite near Kings Lynn, where you can perhaps poach any players who get released from their academy, or potentially even strike like a loan deal with them?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, Norwich have been a great help to us, or certainly to me, since I've been at the club. The problem that Norwich had before is they couldn't help us very much because the gap was too big. It was just too much of they're trying to get their players are essentially almost Premiership players. They've got to be Championship players, and they're not Premiership players. They're on that cusp at the moment. They probably wouldn't like the title of yo-yoing, but they're probably just financially trying to sort themselves out, and they'll probably hope to become a permanent fixture of the Premier League sooner rather than later. So from that perspective, that's the kind of player that they're recruiting is of that caliber. So to be at step 6, where we in non-league terms, where we step 3, step 6 is the reserves of step 6, but anyway, step 3 in terms of non-league, it's too far. The gap is 4 leagues plus 3 leagues. It's just too much. So they couldn't do a lot until we got up, and now we've got up. We as you say, Alfie Payne was one of the lads we had last year. Simon Power this year, who's now gone on to Harrogate. Archie Mayer, who's in goal with us, and there've been others. So it's a kind of club that are very supportive, they're very good to us. They listen, and we've got great relationships with them. And I'm delighted to have them as our near neighbours, because they're friends more than they're certainly never going to be rivals. So it's just nice to have someone there that we can talk to.
Yeah, and I think it came out that before buying Kings Lynn, you nearly bought Wrexham. So what happened with that deal? Why did it end up not going through?
Well, simply because when I was looking at it, the previous owner, well, now it's the previous owner, because it's been obviously sold in the last few days, but Jeff Moss and his business partner were selling it, and they wanted to sell it. They had done their bit and had their time there, and I was close to buying it, and then the fans came through with well, they didn't have an offer, they got it for nothing, but they basically got it. And Jeff Moss is just rang me up one day and said, look, my wife's been threatened. I've had enough, or his girlfriend, I should say, in a shop. He just couldn't cope with the abuse. So he just said, I'm going to let them have it. And I wasn't against, I wasn't that when I first got involved with it, the fans weren't in the picture. It was more that there was another chap going to take it over who was a bit of a, should we say, they weren't over enamored with, and someone else was looking at it and they didn't like him either. So I think what happened is those people galvanized the fans into an action group, and then they decided that they would do a better job than I would, and subsequently they obviously sold it on now to the film stars. So that's all that happened. It was just one of those things. It didn't take too long, and it was just one of those things.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Wrexham fans quite a lot there, and rather harshly on Twitter, they seem to be giving you quite a lot of stick really for everything going on with Kings Lynn like that. So how do you respond to people who, it shouldn't be happening in this day and age, but how do you respond to people who do go on social media and give you hate from behind the screen?
Yeah, I think it's wrong. I mean, we see it with obviously Marcus Rashford's got a great view. He's got a place to be able to preach from. He's a superstar, and therefore when he happens to him, he's able to do it. But it's happening to lots of people, not just Marcus Rashford. Not that he's highlighting the issue, but there's lots of other people involved with it. And I feel it's relentless. And I know how I can describe it is if you were stuck inside a room for 30 hours or so with people just calling you all sorts of stuff, at some point you're going to snap. So of course you do snap, and then of course that's what they want. They want to goad you and I must have blocked 200-300 of them on the time that you're talking about, where they were just being horrible, mocking people's disabilities. They were taking the mickey out of my little kids, and 6-year-old kids. It's just not what the kind of behaviour. And what they're saying is, oh, it's not our fans, but of course they're not calling it out. They're not saying stop this. They're carrying on with it and being part of it. Now it's not every single fan, not every single one of their fans is on Twitter, but I think what they did was what happened that day was wrong, and it's never happened. To be fair, I've disagreed with lots of fans online, not had arguments with them, but we do. Of course, it doesn't mean to say because we disagree, we don't like each other. It just means we have a disagreement about a certain issue. That's what it means. And it doesn't have to respond to those kind of tactics. But with Wrexham, it's gone that extra too far. And I shouldn't react, but equally, it's difficult because why should I pull myself off social media just because a few people from one club decide that they're going to attack you? It's wrong. So I don't think it should happen. I think I've got a bit of a thick skin, but I think really it could send some people off the edge, and it's just not right. It really isn't right, and it should stop.
No, yeah, and I think it was quite disgusting, some of the things you were saying as well, and it's been happening a lot in terms of racism as well in recent weeks, with the likes of Eddie Nketiah, people like that getting a lot of hate for it. But a big debate's come around social media saying that people should have to give an ID when they set up an account, like a passport or a driver's license, something like that, just so if they do throw some abuse about Twitter or Instagram or anything like that, can easily just report it to the police. How do you feel about that in terms of people giving an ID to create social media, so that way at least no one can really get away with it?
Yeah, it wouldn't bother me if I had to give my ID to get a social media account. I mean, what's the, a lot of these people, as you know, hide under fake names, false names. The one that had a go at me that time was a nurse who then pretended that she was a Kings Lynn fan, but it's not true. I mean, that's one of the ways, if someone looks at her Facebook and realised that she wasn't from there. So, but the reality is, if they if got, as you say, got some proper positive ID, they could then at least block them and stop it reoccurring. And these people aren't nice people. It's not. If they weren't doing it online, they'd be doing it probably offline. A lot of them, but they're not able to do that with social meet and greet issues, so they have a go online. It's just like they've obviously got little to do in their life, hasn't got much going on, so they spend their lives just having a go. I've got far more important things to do, but I see, from my perspective, I think it's important to be open, to be able to approach people, because a lot of people they slam chairmen and directors for saying this guy's not available and that guy, but if someone asks me a question, I'll answer it. Now, you don't have to agree with the answer, but that's just the way it is. So you try and do that, and then of course then they attack you for it. So it's wrong. But I think your idea of taking an idea of someone, proving they've got to prove who they are, and if they abuse it, they lose it. And I don't see a problem with that particularly.
Yeah, and I think I actually agree with your approach there, like being open as a chairman as well. Because if you're a fan of Kings Lynn, for example, you'll want to know what's going on behind the scenes. Yeah.
Exactly. You can't always tell everyone everything, because of course they're saying, are you signing this player and that, and of course you can't tell them, but if you're able to say something, you can say something, and it's reasonably good. We've got a great relationship with our fans. We all get on. There are factions on one side, but the odd extreme, one extreme group, but there's not hundreds of them. But they wouldn't attack me on social media, nor would I attack them on social media. I'm not, I wouldn't even know what their social media accounts are. It's just, it's just being civil to people, really, isn't it? And being decent. And I think if you're available to people, they respect that. I can't always answer everything, because sometimes people want an instant reply. I might be on it for 20 minutes and I got something else to do, and I'm on a Zoom call with you. There you go. That's why I talk to you now. 3 or 4 things are coming. I can't do it. So we have to, just do what you can do. But I hope, by being honest, it doesn't mean to say people can just abuse it as a because you're available. They should respect, and I should respect as well. It should work both ways.
Yeah. And we'll move back then towards sort of Kings Lynn matters and last season. I think even the season before that, because I'm not too sure when Ian Culverhouse was actually appointed. But how, as a chairman, then, how do you go around and find the right manager for the club?
Well, Ian's been with us twice now, so the first time is a little bit more difficult than this, if it ever was to happen again, because it depends on where the league. Obviously, you'll know where you are as a Bradford fan. Once you're in the Football League, and everyone wants a job in the Football League, there's only 92 jobs. So that's it. There's only 92 managers, and there's no one can do 2 clubs. So that's all there is. So, but at the beginning, it's tough, because what's the draw? First of all, we are, of course, as I say, we are a bit stuck out, so it makes life a little bit difficult. And then you can't pay very much money, so it's not the most attractive job when you're trying to, get hold of a manager, especially with someone of Ian Culverhouse's calibre. He was at, as you know, Aston Villa. He was at Norwich, at Colchester. He's got good pedigree and, great CV, really. So a great coaching CV, and everyone that we've had working for us says he's the best coach in the business. So every player that's worked for us. So, Ian and I met and we had a conversation. I inherited a manager who was nothing wrong with him. He was a nice guy, and he is still, Gary Setchell. He was still a very much a Kings Lynn man, is a Kings Lynn man, etc. But I just decided that longer term, he wasn't going to be the right man for me. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just not right for me. And it doesn't mean to say he's bad or not good, or just so. And then I was speaking to Ian, and it took a long time, but we decided that he'd like to give it a go. And he came in, and obviously he came in and inherited a team which was not his team, so we had to put up with that. But he tried it and trialed it, and he went through it, good, which is great of him, because not a lot of people would do that. A lot of people were only coming in the summer when I can come and sort it all out, but he came in before and did what he did, and then obviously Ian left and came back, and that left, leaving was a few weeks, and he came back again, and then he's obviously shown what he can do by taking us on with back-to-back promotions, and another season of where we just finished a playoff final, and we lost in the final few minutes to Slough the first season, which was obviously very unlucky. But anyway, there you go. That's what he did. So he's important. Without him, we wouldn't be where we are. There's no question about that.
No, yeah. I think one man who came in, I think it was Ian Culverhouse that signed him. I'm not too sure about that as well, but I probably should have checked when he actually first came to the club. But was Adam Marriott, who was at last season at Kings Lynn, kind of went a bit viral because of how well he was doing. Obviously, he was by far the league's top scorer. For you personally, because obviously Adam's played at quite a high level, playing for Stevenage, Lincoln City, Cambridge. How big of a coup was it for you to bring someone with like the history of Adam? And are you hoping to bring in more players like Adam Marriott who have a good history of playing at quite a high level? Yeah,
I mean, Adam came. I think there was Neil Fry and Robert Back were the kind of stand-in managers holding the fort between Simon Clark's departure and Ian Culverhouse's re-arrival, shall we say. And they signed him. They came to me and said he's a decent player. I looked him up. It's hard. You've got to take. I mean, really, it's their call. But I'd obviously heard of him. He's worked in some clubs, not worked in other clubs, and that's the problem. Sometimes some managers work in some clubs and they don't work in other clubs. There's no rhyme or reason. It depends on the system you play, how you play. If you're a number 10, you don't play with a number 10, or you're a winger, you don't play with wingers. You're not going to do very well at that football club. So it doesn't mean to say you're not right. It just means to say you're not right for them. So Mazza, look, he's a great professional. His record, extraordinary record he had in the previous 2 seasons, and I mean, what must have scored 60 odd goals for us, I guess, at that kind of last 2 seasons. I guess that kind of level, fantastic. And to get someone like Adam, he wasn't happy at Boston. It wasn't working out for him. It wasn't fitting into the style of play that they were doing at Boston. So that was how the chance came about. And when it came about, you have to be bold sometimes and take them. Sometimes they work, they don't all work. It's just the nature of the beast. and that's it. And a lot of the time as well, it depends on what league you're in, what the manager is, whether they rate them. All these little things come together. But the chairman hasn't got a lot to do with it. I mean, the money thing, the M word, is the only thing really where the chairman gets, there has that. But you don't want people just coming for the money. They're just coming for the money, and then they're not going to get that here anyway. So it's the wrong club. You get the point. You don't want to bring people in just for the money. You want them to come because they want to come, and then and the money is a secondary issue. But that's it. So I hope we can bring in many more like Adam. But obviously, it all depends who's available and what our budget's like at the time, whether we're able to do it.
And sort of move on to like some coronavirus sort of situations then. Last season, Kings Lynn did get promoted, so first of all, congratulations for that. Probably a bit late now, but
sure.
Anyways. And there was a lot of talk around then, because obviously it went to, I believe it was points per game, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah. Points per game. We finished second, but points per game we finished top. And I think that, I can't remember now how many games we had in hand, but that's what it was. And that was the only fair way of doing it. It's a different thing to this season, because we've got through, I don't know if it was 70% or 75%, but a lot of the season had already been played, and we weren't asking other teams to play and bankrupt themselves to finish the season just for our sake. It was at that point. So I think you have to play at least 2/3 of a season to go points per game. And if you go 60, 65%, then it's okay. But you can't do it at less than that, because no one's even played each other, certain teams, which is crazy. So that's how we went up. It was points per game, and York fans will feel hard done by, and I understand why. There's no perfect solution. Had they gone up and not us, we would have definitely felt hard done by too. So it's a very difficult call for both teams, really, both clubs. But luckily for us anyway, we went up, and we were obviously pleased about it.
Did this promotion shock you in any way? Because obviously this is your first season in National League North, so to go straight back up to go straight up again to the National League. Did you have to rejuggle some things behind the scenes so you could actually stay afloat, I guess, in the National League?
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, the money, obviously, in a normal season on the National League would be difficult, and with coronavirus, it's been even worse. But we had to obviously do some ground improvements, which we just got our Grade A license, which means we can play at national. It's a National League stadium as opposed to a National League North or South stadium. We had to put some more things in. I mean, just silly little things. Not silly little things, but they're things like first aid rooms. You got to have a dedicated first aid room. We didn't have a space for it, so we had to buy one. It's just stuff like that. Turnstiles. Number of turnstiles, segregated areas, all these things. So anyway, we've catering units, etc. But that was it. Look, I had already planned for it a year in advance, because I planned to go up the year before. Obviously, I had no idea we would go up, but I always try and get my plans in place. So I'm a little bit of a step ahead, because otherwise you've only got the summer to do it. It doesn't give you any time at all, especially if your wife wants to take her away on holiday. You're squeezed a little bit on the pressure front. So, it surprised me that we went up. Yes, and I didn't think so. I thought we deserved to go up I thought we were the best football team in the league, I'll be honest. And I think a lot of people would say the same thing. So I thought we just played a very nice brand of football. It was great to watch, and that was that. So, and then it would have been a travesty if the ground wasn't up to date. But in terms of the actual financing side of things, it isn't an easy job ever in football. It really isn't an easy job, as you know. And so, is it any harder? The numbers just get bigger. Obviously, you get a little bit more coming through the gate, I guess. In normal times, we have no experience of that. But you get a little bit more, and you could charge a little bit more because the opposition's a bit more attractive, and they bring more away fans with them. But in reality, then you've got on the other side, the players want more money, the trips are longer. So whatever you give out one hand, you get. It's all an equilibrium scenario. But the problem is the gap does get bigger. You've got to fund, and that's what makes life very, very tricky, and for anyone at our level, really.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the National League level now then as well. Obviously, you've mentioned that you want to sit out the rest of the season with Kings Lynn because of obviously all the money issues going on. What is your thoughts then towards obviously the rest of the league? You have some big teams in the National League like Chesterfield. Sure. Well, maybe not Chesterfield right now, but Notts County. You have a lot of quite big teams that league. Obviously, a lot more financially well off than Kings Lynn. So, do you feel now is more important than ever for the league to become more sort of unified in that sense?
Well, I don't think I think there needs to be a unified message. I don't think we should be punished. I mean, I don't necessarily feel, but I don't believe the league feels either, that the league can't continue. There may be 6 or 7 clubs that can't afford to continue, and those 6 or 7 clubs, in my opinion, should be able to sit out, and the other clubs should then carry on. And there'll still be 16 or 17 of them, and it's probably enough for them to have a league. Obviously, it's going to change the league. They probably have to expunge the results, and that would mean that the league positions might then alter, etc. But from my point of view, those other clubs shouldn't force us down a route where we'd have to borrow a lot of money. I would rather play. Obviously, I'd always rather play football. But to play football, we've got to have some money coming. If we had some grants, I'd happily play. I'm not saying I wouldn't put some money in towards it, but we have to have some grants to cover some of it. And the bigger clubs could probably afford to pay all our wages and all the 6 or 7 other clubs' wages, and between them, and have a league. But they're not going to do that, and I wouldn't ask them to do it. But the point is, they can afford to continue without affecting their balance sheets whatsoever. We've seen, as you say, Chesterfield signed tons of players recently, and throwing money around as if it's confetti. So good for them that they're in that position, but we're not in that position. So we have to be. We've been bust twice, I think, before my time. We can't keep putting fans through the ringer, and it's not fair on them. That it should happen. So there would be one thing taking on debt if we were. For example, if we ever got into the Football League, you've got to have 2,000 seats within 3 years. So we're going to have to build an extra 1,000 seats. Now that's obviously going to involve taking on debt. But that's one thing, because there's something left behind for that debt. You've got a stand, at least. But to just take it just to pay bills to get through the end of the season is a different scenario. So I think what the league should do is not punish us and allow us to sit it out, and allow any other clubs that want to do it to sit it out, and then for the league itself to carry on, to continue on.
Yeah. And you mentioned as well that Kingsley would need more than £300,000 to finish off the season. Obviously, with all the grants being turned to loans now, which just wouldn't work in the long term, where are they actually expecting you to get this sort of money from? Are they expecting you just to bring it out of your own pocket?
No, I think Sporting will lend it to us. That's the upside. I mean, if you want to call it an upside, I don't know. Some people call it a big downside. But the problem with it is twofold. First of all, what's to stop some chairman taking that money and then gambling it next season, doubling the wage bill, for example, and hoping they go up? And if it fails, it's not me that's on the hook for it. It's the football club on the hook for it. The government eventually would have to take the club down. Now, would the government, if the club couldn't afford to pay it back? See, if the terms aren't too bad. I don't know what they are yet, because I haven't spoken to them, but it's at least 10 years. So you get 4 years without paying. It's probably at 2% over base. It's not horrific, the terms. But the problem with it is, it's all okay if we stay in this league and everything goes upwards. But if we start falling downwards, how on earth is the club supposed to pay for it? Because it couldn't afford to lose 5% of its, which is what they take out your turnover to pay it back. It would be a diabolical situation for Kings Lynn. So that's the problem with it. I don't think the money is going to be an issue. I think everyone's going to get the money. The government are quite happy to dish the money out via Sport England, but the issue isn't that. It's the issue is how one repays the money once that chairman is long gone as the custodian of that club. The club and that community are then left with that debt.
And your game was recently postponed as well against Dover Athletic, because they just, am I right to figure that they just can't play with the financial problems?
That's right, as far as I understand it,
Yeah, and the league, I believe, have gone and fined Dover as well for not being able to fulfil the fixture. So it's happened quite a lot in National League North and South as well, with the National League actually fining clubs for refusing to play. Do you think this is right in what they're doing? I mean, obviously, it's if clubs can't play games because they're financially behind, if that makes sense, surely fining them is just going to make it even worse.
Yeah, I don't think they've been fined yet. They've been charged. So that's what you'll find. So what will happen now is they'll sit in front of an independent panel, which we don't know who that is yet. That will be a new board or new group of people, and they will decide what punishment happens to Dover. Now that could be a fine, which could be quite substantial. It could be, which is ridiculous, as you say. It would make the situation much worse. They could get a points deduction. They could get thrown out the league. And reality is, it's not Dover's fault, but they're in the situation. Dover were told that they were going to get grants until they could let fans back in. That's not been the case, and now they're being told that they might be in all sorts of trouble for basically. I mean, he was part of the board, admittedly, but for believing what was the board was saying, which he was part of. So if even board members are thinking it's true, obviously something's gone wrong somewhere, between the government and the National League. And I probably blame both of them. It wouldn't surprise me that the government have done a U-turn on what they said. But equally, why didn't the CEO at the time get a document signed? I know there's a rush, and they had to get things together, but during that 3-month period, i.e. October, November, December, that a further grant would be forthcoming. They didn't do that, and that was the mistake, in my opinion, that they made. And then, of course, the reason I understand that the grants haven't been forthcoming is because lots of other clubs complained about the distribution of the grants, and the government took a very dim view of this and thought, look, we don't want to have a big argument in full view of the public. Most people, when they get given money, are quite happy. They smile, they say thank you very much, and off they go. We didn't, as a not as Kings Lynn, but as a group of clubs, 60 odd clubs, we argued between ourselves about it, and because of that, the government turned around and said, well, we're not giving you any more money then. Yeah, and that's what's clearly happened, and that's a mistake those other clubs made. They should have held our discussions internally, and I don't get me wrong, I have a bit of sympathy for some of those things, but some of their points, but anyway, the net result is they've cut their nose off to spite their face. Now no one's got any money, so everyone's done badly. So there you go. So I don't think anyone should be punished, and I think people should just be able to sit out.
Yeah, and obviously, how with Dover, because they let you know before the fixture took place, obviously, that the game would not be going ahead because they can't physically make it go ahead. But how good was the communication then between the National League, Dover, and Kings Lynn?
Well, fine. I mean, Dover were very upfront about it. You know, I mean, I'd spoken to their chairman before anyway and talked about it, and that was it. Their secretary had spoken to our secretary, and that was it. It was all told it was off, and then the league told us a day later that the game was off because we'd already been told it by Dover it was off. So it was all fine, and as you'd expect, and and fine. Yeah, so it was perfectly adequate.
Good, yeah. And obviously, we'll quickly go down to National League North South. Kings Lynn obviously have some history in there with get promotion last season. So did you sort of think it's the right decision to null and void that league?
Well, look, I thought it was the right decision to give them the decision, because I think that was important, because they always complain they haven't got enough votes, which we everyone thinks that, although they can't have more votes because otherwise the North and the South would outvote the National League because it's double the number of clubs. So I can understand why. But I thought, look, of course, if you're a full-time outfit, and there are full-time outfits at step 3. South Shields is a full-time outfit, of course, and they couldn't take part. So it isn't easy. But I can't see that they were left with any alternative. They were going to break clubs. They were going to bust football clubs to achieve their aims. What they were saying, there was no relegation. So what we're going to do is you're basically playing to allow one of those few clubs to get, or two of those few clubs to get promoted, and it's not really right. So if they were all told at the beginning of the season, look, you're not getting grants, you're only getting loans, it wouldn't have started anyway. So whilst I can sympathise with their position, I think they did the right thing to stop, if that's what they voted to do.
Yeah, and you put on Twitter as well how you think it'd be a smart idea to make a mini league of clubs in the National League North and South who could all compete for one promotion spot. Is it to the? Am I right? I think it's to the National League to replace Macclesfield. Yeah, that's it. So that the teams in the National League who maybe don't want to continue, like yourself and possibly Dover, then don't have to play, but there will still be a promotion place to the National League. Yeah,
I wouldn't be against that idea at all. I think it's a sensible idea, but I don't think it will happen, because I think the problem is that you would then be changing the rules of the competition halfway through the season, and I'm not sure the FA would allow it. Now, they might do. If these are exceptional times with exceptional circumstances, and the FA might say, due to that, we're prepared to make an exception and allow them to do it. But it's riddled with problems, because if you're if you were to do it as a league and you're one of the football clubs participating, and then let's say you lose the first 5 games, well, that chairman might think, well, bugger this, I don't want to put any more money in. I've already spent, we can't make it. And again, it's the same situation as some clubs might find themselves in at our league now. Difference, and he might be able to afford to do it, just chooses not to do it. And then also, the other problem might come that another one of the clubs might say, well, hell you what, we weren't going to continue, but now there's only 19 clubs in it, and it's split between the two. And we're starting from 0 again. We fancy actually having a go. So they might want to jump into it, you see. So you can see the problems that could actually happen. The only way, therefore, really it could be is probably a semi-knockout style league to go all the way through straight away, and that I wouldn't be against. I think that would be a sensible solution if it was doable. But again, they, I think, want 4 promotion spots, and they're not being realistic about that. And I can't see in a million years. You must remember that promotion doesn't cause litigation, but relegation does always cause litigation as a general rule. So knowing that the league's board would want to minimise litigation, and knowing that the FA would want to minimise litigation, the last thing they want to do is relegate anyone, which means if they promote more than one team, that means at the very least they'll be relegating more clubs the following season. Yeah. Again, there's a risk there, so I can't see it happening more than one club.
No, I think one team that would possibly want to be involved in that is obviously Gloucester City, who were, I believe, the top of the National League North, had a great season with that. I'm not thinking they're a part-time club.
I think they were. I don't know if they still are. They've moved back, haven't they, to their ground, so I'm not sure now where they are. They're part-time. They certainly were last season, but I'm not sure about this season.
Yeah. Well, they've obviously had a great season in their position, but they are potentially taking the National League, starting a legal battle with them, obviously, because of everything that's happened. They think they deserve promotion to the National League for how good of a season they've had. Do you have any thoughts in terms of starting a legal battle with the National League? Could this really work for Gloucester?
No, I think they're wasting the money. And I think they should put it towards another worthwhile cause rather than putting it into lawyers' pockets. Essentially, for it to happen, they'd have to first of all cause that the resolutions were wrongly drafted, and the time to do that is before you vote on them. You need to say, hang on a second, I've got a problem with this resolution as a club member, and put that to the board. They didn't do that. They probably voted. Lots of clubs did vote, and it's no good saying after the vote, well, I didn't agree with the vote, so therefore, it's like someone saying, well, you know what, I didn't agree with Brexit, we better rerun it. We had all that before. It's the same kind of thing to keep rerunning these arguments. You've got to accept a democratic vote. People will say, why aren't you accepting a democratic vote? But it's a little bit different for us because we can't afford to continue. But we're quite happy for the league to continue. We just don't want us to continue. That's the difference we're trying to. But I guess they could be reversing that the other way around. But the point is, it's very hard once you put that resolution out saying there will be no relegation, there will be no promotion, to then say, oh, now we're going to do it. So I think they'll have a very hard job. But the other main issue is one of practicalities. For that to go all the way, I mean, they have to appeal laterally first, then the FA, then they probably have to end up in the Court of Arbitration of Sport, which was going to cost them 250 grand. And they're not going to get that done by next season. They haven't got a hope in hell. So even if he wants to blow hundreds of thousands of pounds, which maybe between 19 of them they could do, it's going to take months to do it, and they're going to muck next season up. So I can't see practically how it's possible. And I'm not saying they can't win it, because you never know in courts. Who knows what's going to happen, but it's very unlikely, I think, that they'll win.
Yeah, and to be honest, they're at the top of the league, but they're 5 points ahead of AFC Fylde. They've got 3 games in hand anyway, so Fylde will take over them. And obviously Chesterfield have nabbed a lot of their key players, really, because obviously James Rowe went to Chesterfield.
Yeah.
So do you have any thoughts on Chesterfield furloughing their players but continuing to sign new ones?
Well, it's within the rules, whether it's morally correct is another thing, because you could just carry on signing who you want, and then ones that don't work but it won't go on forever. After the summer, we're here tonight from Boris how long they're going to follow for, but my guess after August or so, that will be the end of it. You won't be able to do it anymore. But look, it's Chesterfield. That's how they run their club. It's how they run their club. I wouldn't just. I mean, I guess. I mean, we've got problems that the new players we've signed since November, we can't furlough them. Of course, it's no good. So that's the other problem we've got. If we stop the season, we've still got contracts in place with players that can't be furloughed. So we still have an issue ourselves there. So I don't know. It's one of those things which is down to each individual club really to take its own view on that kind of thing, I think.
Yeah, and so we'll move away then and sort of back towards Kings Lynn. Obviously, I think did you start this season, or was it a earlier season where you started commentating on games?
Oh, just this season, just for the lockdown. Yeah.
So how are you finding that? Are you enjoying it?
Yeah, I mean, it's weird having no fans in the ground and no atmosphere, no theatre, no fun. So it takes my mind off it a little bit. I have to concentrate, which I do concentrate at football anyway. I like to concentrate on the game, but it's just you can't see so well because we're squatted down on the terrace, and we're sitting on the terrace, so we can't really get a great view, which is a problem sometimes. But other than that, I enjoy it. Mark's great when he enjoys doing it, and I'm only the wing man. I'm not the main act, and it's just nice it gives us that sense of bond with our fans, even though they're not in the ground. We've got that kind of link still there, and from that purpose, it's quite nice too.
Yeah. What would you say is probably the toughest game you've had to commentate on the season in terms of opponent then for Kings Lynn?
Toughest opponent or toughest game? Yeah, toughest
opponent, I'd say. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Boreham Wood, very, very good. Yeah, I mean, very strong, solid at home. Really, really good. Bromley were equally brilliant. I mean, to be honest with you, it's a tough league. It's a much harder league. I know you won't appreciate me saying this than League Division 2. I think it's a harder league because if you look at the points and say, well, where are the easy points here? Okay, obviously Dover were having a tough time. Everyone knew that. So you could argue then this season, not necessarily last season, but this season because of what was happening to them. But take them away. You look at Willstone, they've come up and they've beaten lots. Look at Altrincham, they've come up with us, and through the playoffs, and they've ripped it up, done very, very well. So there's no easy games, and there really isn't. I know it's a silly football adage, but there are no easy games. There's no guaranteed points where we've got to win here and here and here. Okay, Barnet aren't having a great season, but they're still a decent football side. And Weymouth, they've turned it around in the last few weeks, and got that lad on loan from Cambridge to Dallas, the striker who's banged in loads of goals. So that's the hard part. There hasn't been a poor side really turn up at the Walks, and in my opinion, they're all decent, and that's great for us, but it also means it's really, really tough because you've got to raise your level every game.
Yeah, and this sort of goes with the commentary thing, so I've kind of structured this terribly here, but obviously you run your own podcast, the I Bought a Football Club podcast. How are you finding that as well? Do you find it ever difficult? Because I know when I run this podcast, sometimes I'll say something I have to cut out afterwards, or I'll accidentally talk too quick or anything like that. So how are you finding it?
I mean, I enjoy it because, my problem with it is getting the consistency of coming in every week. I do it every now and then. I could do it 3 or 4 times for a couple of days when there was things happening on the previous promotion playoff, and we were trying to get two clubs, having a playoffs, etc. But then not a little bit. But the reason being is that it's so busy running a club. I mean, I've got a call with Sport England. Then I've got a call with the accountant. Then I've got a call with I don't know. I've got to look at my diary, but and it goes on and on and on and on. And then my wife will be screaming at me, so you don't see the kids, so I have to go down and say hello to them. And then I've got something else going, and then it's back tomorrow night. I've got a TV, I've got a game, and then I come back. There's a thing on telly I've got to do, and so it goes on. And so it's relentless, and it's very hard. But what I enjoy doing about it is you can get someone on. I try and make it not so much about me, a little bit about communicating with the club. That's how it started. When we shut down in March. That's when it started last March. Yeah. Well, it was last March, it's nearly a year ago. We were trying to communicate with, I think we've done 35 podcasts in a year, so it's not too bad, not nearly a year. Yeah, it's all right. But the idea is to show people what it's like running a club and show them the other side. Is to trying to get guests on who run clubs or parts of clubs or own clubs and see what they think. And we've had a few interesting people. Well, they're all interesting people. And we've also had people on who run different bits of clubs. Ray, who runs the Everton, used to run the Everton Academy, and agents on like Dan, who was very good, and economic guys, and just different kind of your voices, but all which perhaps should be quite interesting if you're not necessarily hearing all these different, because you don't always hear the mainstream media watch some of the stuff that goes on. So I quite enjoy that, but it's not, the actual podcast itself isn't hard work. It's getting that podcast. People, as you may know, I let you down once. People do let you down. They say I'll come and do it, and then they don't, and something flares up. And I think last week we were going to do it, and then it flared up with all this stuff, and I had to sort all that out. And that's the problem. And you understand it, but it just you gritted teeth sometimes. You think, come on, give me a break. And it's probably you go through similar stuff, do you? Yeah,
to be fair, quite a bit of time for me to ask you with everything going on with National League, but yes, I think we have one more thing to ask you, which I ask everyone who comes onto the podcast, and I don't know if you could really answer this as a chairman, but what football club do you actually support?
What football club do I support? Well, Chelsea, as I grew up, that was my team. Who your lot beat us. So remember the FA Cup? Famously.
I was thinking that. Yeah.
So I remember that when I've done this podcast. How do I know? Anyway, yes, no, it's great, good for you. You deserved it on the day. I wasn't there, but you did deserve it. And it's nice for clubs that don't always get the limelight to get their days of limelight. It is important. Yeah. But look, I supported Chelsea, but I supported them when we were rubbish. In 1977, I went to my first game, so it was a long time ago, and we were absolute rubbish in those days, and we nearly got relegated to the old third division in my earlier years of supporting. So it's just the way it was, and it only became good later on. But the problem with Premier League football is it's got no soul to me, and it's and if you look at they seem fans as a necessary evil, and what they haven't realised, they now realise that without the fans, they've got nothing to sell. No one's interested in it. It's just not that interesting to watch football without fans. Whatever they think, they lose the passion, they lose the theatre, they lose everything about which is what makes the game. And we have got interesting, our fans. They're trying to sanitise it rather too much. Like, we all get what you can't do, but you've also got to be a little bit around the edges to allow people to express themselves without clamping down on everything. The thought police are in everyone's head all the time. But the reality is they now haven't got a product, so they need the fans in to be able to have anything that's worthwhile selling. And I think that TV's at the top of its cycle. I think there's going to be so much more. There are more competitors for it, but equally we've got the Premier League now wanting that Champions League to be expanded so they can get the money there, and they're not that interested then in the Carabao Cup will then get dumped, and so will the FA Cup will get diluted, so that they'll move all the games from Saturdays till midweek, and so on and so on. And these are all things which are part of our heritage and our history that they shouldn't really, especially the FA Cup, they shouldn't really play games with, because it's an important day out in the football calendar. It's the most, well, it was until they screw it up, the most important cup competition in the world, and why throw that away? But anyway, that's what they're doing. So look, do I go to Chelsea? Obviously I don't go at the moment because no one goes, but I last season I went once. I always go. Kings Lynn's much more important to me than Chelsea, and I much more enjoy watching Kings Lynn than I do watch Chelsea. And my little boy supports both teams. They all have a Premier League team, don't they? These little boys, but Kings Lynn more important to him as well. So Kings Lynn's, my allegiance. If Kings Lynn played Chelsea, I'd want Kings Lynn to win all day long. That's where my allegiance is these days. But obviously, I keep an eye out for Chelsea because it's a club. You don't just lose the teams. But you obviously keep an eye out for them. But it isn't the same. And it's not just me saying that. A lot of fans which I grew up with, going to games with, oddballs, you don't necessarily see them outside of football, but they all turn up, and different guises, and they, roll into various pubs and, say different, and a lot of them are just falling away now, just not feeling the love, should we say. They don't feel the love anymore, and that's a shame. So, and I think that's where non-league's got a chance of doing something quite good, and, picking some of that up, and being the real deal, which perhaps is what we always want with football. And it's, that's the light we can shine, I guess, hopefully.
Yeah, well, I was going to say that. I think you find nowadays a lot more people are dropping down to non-league football to enjoy it, because there's just something special about it. Just being at the game where you just talk to anyone you want, you literally about 3 meters from the manager if you want to say something to him, anything like that. Obviously, not saying the hate to him, but there's just something special about it nowadays. I don't know what it is. I can't wait for non-league football to come back, honestly. Well, but that is going to bring an end to this week's episode of the Benchwarmers Podcast. As usual, I'd like to thank my guest this week, Stephen Cleeve. Stephen, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me on.
And I hope things work out with Kings Lynn as well.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Yeah. And we'll see you all next week.
Look forward to it.